like to apologize for the delay. We had some network issues, so we couldn't connect. So, welcome to the Business and Banking Dialogue show. There are two big things, big themes that could dramatically change how commerce is conducted in the payment space over the next decade. One is around artificial intelligence and machine learning, and the other is around cryptocurrency and blockchain. The AI and ML, for instance, will enable companies to be more efficient with their employee bases and drive higher productivity. AI can also help businesses that rely on new payment platforms to fight an age-old enemy in finance in the form of fraud. To discuss on AI and ML and their adoption in transforming the digital landscape, please join me in welcoming Mr. Ganesh Kumar, who is already on your screen. He's already been on the screen for some time now. So, so welcome, sir, to the Business and Banking Dialogue. So, good evening and welcome to the Banking Dialogue.
Yeah, good evening, KK. Good evening to the entire audience. Always a pleasure to be actually interacting with a group of highly intelligent people. And when a topic is going to be artificial intelligence, I don't know how artificial I will be and how I can make you all actually get to the same bandwagon that is there. Yes, KK did talk about a little bit of a problem initially. Well, these days it's easy to actually get disconnected very fast or get connected without either the video or the audio or a combination of both. If one were to have had AI or artificial intelligence in this, I'm sure the system would have known whether the issue was at Ganesh Kumar's end or at the host end or at somebody else's end. And it would have sent a message across saying, do this to set it right. Or possibly it would have initiated a command to my device or KK's device or your own, whoever is the delegate's device. It would have set it right, and the video would have started and without any delay. So that's the power of AI. I will try to do some justice and try to give some sneak previews into what is going to happen in the digital space in the future, thanks to AI and ML. We are talking about AI and ML and not about AML, which is one of the things which everybody has a lot of concern in the financial world. So I won't bore you with the introduction anymore. I hand it over back again to KK, who can start off the dialogue.
Yeah. So we will get on with the dialogue, but for the purpose of the audience who are new and who don't know Ganesh Kumar, Mr. Ganesh Kumar has been our regular speaker, a very speaker who has been with us and heard a lot. So Mr. Ganesh Kumar is the former chairman of the Indian Financial Technology and Allied Services, IFTAS as it is called. Mr. Kumar was earlier ED of RBI and was instrumental in introducing MICR-based check processing. We've talked about it in our earlier shows on the MICR-based check processing, RTG. He's also been instrumental in RTGS, check truncation, and all other electronic data interchange initiatives. All these payment systems touch our everyday life, ladies and gentlemen, and making it easy for all of us to pay small or big value money in terms of payments. And they have, and Mr. and Ganesh sir has been instrumental in bringing these kind of payment systems to the fore and to the good of the public. So thank you very much, sir, for joining us. And let's get going with our discussion for the day. So as per the, we are talking today on AI, artificial intelligence and machine learning. As per the PwC report, India is expected to contribute 2.2% of the world's digital payment marketing by 2023. What role can AI and ML play in transforming the face of digital payments and help achieve this dream?
Good point, KK. Nice way to start off. It's always nice to start off with some statistics because nobody can actually question statistics because they are the truth. Nice. Yes, the PwC report does talk about India having a substantial role to play in the payments market. But I would actually try to backtrack a little bit and then come to where we started off. since KK did make a mention about my role in starting MICR technology, that was many decades ago when I did not have the gray hair, or when I had more hair, I should put it that way, which is very little that I have now. I used to always wonder how a check can be read by a machine. Those were the initial days of computerization, and those of you who share the gray hair with me will realize how difficult it was to actually introduce computers into the banks. There were trade unions which were against them. There were customers who had doubts about how the computer will work, and more importantly, we had huge challenges in the form of availability of stable electric power, leave alone communication technologies. I used to wonder how, as I said, a computer can read a check. But then when we started the MICR technology, not only could we understand that the computer can read a check, but it could read a check with such a speed. We used to have machines which were called reader sorters, high-speed reader sorters, which used to read 2,400 checks per minute, which means roughly 40 checks per second. When I did this, 40 checks have been read. Now, it's difficult for anybody to even think about storing that much of memory, but then moving that checks at that speed, which was roughly equivalent to around 260 kilometers per hour, which is faster than the fastest train in India today. Maybe it's equivalent to the plane speed. So that is what was something in the late 80s we started off. The mid 90s and the early turn of the millennium started us with seeing digital payment systems. The one used to wonder, how can you move money electronically? We never moved money electronically. We moved information electronically. We moved bits and bytes electronically, but at the receiving end or at the sending end, the money was converted into bits and bytes. At the receiving end, it was reassembled into money form, and that is how the settlement used to take place, with the settlement happening in Reserve Bank, and that was the initial steps for the real-time gross settlement system. We have moved substantially from there. Today, in fact, if there is one country in the world where there is a plethora of payment systems for the retail customer, plethora of digital payment systems using multiple delivery channels. I can use my mobile, I can use my computer, I can use my laptop, I can use my iPad. Well, I can use a paper strip which is hung in a shop in the form of a QR code, and using a camera, I can send across money. So things which one could never have dreamt of, things which possibly one can say is in the sixth phase or the sixth domain, has now become reality. So the next phase of reality, in my view, having seen so many, and in fact, having seen the demise of so many as well, the next layer of technology is going to be using technology, but then using artificial intelligence. And how is AI and machine learning going to change the phase of digital payments? KK did make a relevant point about blockchain. A substantial amount of experiments on blockchain has actually happened in India. Quite a lot of real-time blockchain-based systems are already in vogue. Small systems like issues of letter of credit, where there is a segment which has to be added on to the block as it keeps moving on when the bill is discounted using a letter of credit. There is blockchain which is going to be used for digital currencies. A lot of us have experienced that in the private digital currencies which are there, whether it is in the Bitcoin, whether it is in Ethereum, whether it is in all of the private digital currency which is there. There's a lot of talk about central bank digital currency. Where are we? Well, India is not yet on the roadmap, but digital payments, India is certainly the leader in the world. Things like the United Payment Interface, UPI, things like using IMPS, QR-based payments, although we have multiple QRs and there is an effort towards moving towards standardized QR codes. All this is now reality. And if one were to actually get some confidence during the pandemic period and even during the demonetization, it was the digital payments which came to the rescue of the crores of citizens of the country who otherwise could not have access to physical modes of funds transfers.
Yeah.
What is going to be the future? So that's where the role of artificial intelligence comes. A lot of people have concerns about artificial intelligence. A lot of people have misgivings about artificial intelligence. A lot of people have actually huge expectations from artificial intelligence. Where is it that we are going to go? The path is somewhere in the middle. Like when you enter into a forest and there is a forking road, do you take the left or do you take the right? One doesn't know which one will take us out of the forest, but then the one who dares to enter into it will ultimately reach the goal, whether it's a dead end or it's an end leading to the end of the alley. Similarly, in artificial intelligence, there's going to be, at this point of time, there's a lot of uncertainty. But then I can say with a lot of confidence that the uncertainty is already fading away into certainty. There are many areas where artificial intelligence has actually made its presence felt, especially in customer relationship management. I am aware of a few banks which have started not huge initiatives, but baby step initiatives on customer relationship management using AI. And it's something very similar to this. I did talk about this in one of the previous sessions. I enter my bank where I do my normal banking transactions. And as I enter into the bank, because my face, my image is already there, there is a camera as I enter into the bank for security purposes, which sees whether I'm a valid customer or not, like we have in ATMs today. Now, this is an unobtrusive camera situated at a corner. It's actually validated me. It knows that it is Ganesh Kumar. It knows that I'm banking with that particular bank. A message goes to my customer relationship manager in the bank stating that Ganesh Kumar has entered the bank. So within a matter of a few seconds, as I enter towards the lobby of the bank, my customer relationship manager walks down the alley, and let's assume that it's a she, just to make things attractive. She comes over to me and says, "Hello, Mr. Kumar, what do you want me to do?" Looks like science fiction, but this is something which is happening in a few banks.
Good to meet you, sir.
Well, yeah, but the AI doesn't stop there. In fact, I would envisage that in the very short future, which is just maybe a few months from now, maybe when the pandemic effect is somewhere down the sliding slope and then we become somewhat normal to the pre-COVID times, I would actually envisage that this lady doesn't come to me and say, "Hello, Mr. Kumar, welcome to this branch." On the contrary, she is going to come and say, "Look, I know you've come to the branch to find out the balance in your account, and you want to transfer 2,500 rupees to the account of your son who is studying in this engineering college. His monthly quota is due. The money is already ready to be transferred. Do you want to authorize it?" And I'm not going to say I'm going to authorize it. I'm just going to blink my eye. And the moment I blink my eye, the camera which is there captures it and says, "Okay." She immediately says, "Yes, sir, I've seen that you have authorized it. The money has reached your son or will reach your son in the next 2 seconds or 3 seconds. Looks like, again, science fiction, but that is not the case, because the tools which are available in artificial intelligence has known that Ganesh Kumar makes a transaction on the 27th of every month to a particular branch for the account of his son, who, although he has not told the bank has come to know using artificial intelligence that he is studying in this college, he is studying for this course, this is the amount of fees that has to be paid, or this is the amount of hostel rent that has to be paid, or whatever it is. And since it is a repetitive transaction, the customer service relationship manager knows that this is what I've come for, and actually authorizes the transaction. Now, I'll step one step backward. I don't even need to go to that branch to do it. On the contrary, I get an SMS on 26th midnight. It also checks and sees whether I'm asleep or I'm awake. And being one of those late owls, it finds that I'm still working on some document. So a pop-up comes and says, "Money has to be transferred to your son tomorrow. Shall we do it?" And at 12:01, an authorization goes to the bank. The bank finds that there is money in the account and the transaction takes place. I have not initiated any transaction. I've only acknowledged a transaction. So one of the changes which is going to happen in the form of AI is that instead of customer initiating and authorizing, it's going to be customer validating. So the responsibility of pushing the transaction is going to move over from the bank to the customer, which is good news for the banks. The customer has more control over his transactions, which is good news for the customers. The customer need not even think about the transaction, because at the back end, some system which has got AI, he knows, he has the confidence that it is going to help him in doing the transaction. More importantly, the AI is not all what I said is only at the outlier, only at the sidelines of the transaction. But most important use of AI is going to be, once I have done the validation, the artificial intelligence tool is now going to take over, and it is going to see which channel to use. It finds that the money has to go to my son immediately, tries to see whether IMPS is available, NEFT is available. I know NPCI has come out with a rule saying that more than 30% of the transactions cannot be put in by one operator. A lot of debate and discussion is happening. How can you stop it? How can you do it? Maybe AI comes out and says, "Look, this particular channel, there is huge traffic congestion there. So seamlessly it moves over. Instead of IMPS, it says, okay, let me do it through NEFT, or let me do it through some other channel." The transaction happens without Ganesh Kumar knowing that it has moved through. And the AI tool also not only sees that the transaction has gone through, it is actually monitoring the movement of the transaction every nanosecond. And the moment the credit is gone to my son's bank account, His bank is not sending a confirmation bank. The artificial intelligence tool is actually getting a confirmation because it is monitored. It sends itself a transaction message back to me saying that your money has landed in the account of your son. And we know that he is trying to think and use this money for seeing a movie rather than using it for the hostel rent. Well, that's last portion may not happen, but at least that much is possible. Again, looks like science fiction,
Yes.
but no, there are standard interfaces which are already being planned, made, and these are going to make the AI-based digital transactions happen. Now, I've given at a very, very elementary, rudimentary level as to what can happen. Maybe if
Yes.
there is some interest, I can talk a little more about the technology behind it, about how it's going to happen and how safety and security are going to be ensured. Or if that is not a prime importance because that we have enough fintech people to take care of that, then we can talk about what are the other challenges in using AI and how are you going to use it. I think I'll stop
So,
with it and allow
so,
KK to
so,
actually. Yes, KK.
so if you allow me to intervene, I think you have given an excellent, uh, an example of AI. Okay, there's absolutely no right. I think that makes it very clear for the general audience. So similarly, can you look at ML? Can you give us? Can you give the audience, a simple example so that they all are able to relate to AI and ML?
Okay, it's actually, I would actually say that like the Indian marriage, artificial intelligence and machine language have to go hand in hand. And I would actually dream that there is no divorce at all in this.
Yeah.
And that's why I made a mention of the Indian marriage, because a typical Indian marriage, there are no divorces. The groom and the bride may not have seen one another before the marriage, but they will ensure that they see each other till they die. That's not happening today in the Indian marriages, but anyway, leave that as it is. The reason why I said that this needs to be a healthy marriage is because machine language, as the term talks, is about something that a machine is going to do. In fact, I'm glad that for once the IT industry came with a generic term rather than relating it to a particular device. And said it is machine language. It is not a language which is known only to, let's say, a mobile phone which runs on Android, or an iPhone or an iPad which runs on a platform which is developed by Apple, or a Microsoft platform which which is used to run a laptop or any other desktop, etc. So what is this machine language? Again, let me try to relate it to a common example, therefore people understand it better, and then we can build up the other foundation levels to go up to the level of an IT expert. It's just a series of instructions. A series of instructions, all of us know that it is what is called a program or a computer code, which, thanks to the current initiatives of the government, even a 5-year-old kid is supposed to be a master in programming. And I'm sure, I know that a few kids have even got awards for this. So once there is a set of instructions which is made available to a machine, and the set of instructions tells what has to be done, the machine will faithfully follow whatever has to be done. The challenge is not on what the machine has to be done. The challenge is how to get the set of instructions do what it is intended to do. And that is where the role of another term which all of us have been using called big data comes in. So there's a whole lot of data already available. Artificial intelligence analyzes this data and says, this is the purpose or this is the outcome of that data. Based on that data, we have got, in fact, you would have heard about 4th and 5th generation languages. The next generation language converts this into a code based on the data, which will give an output which is required for further decisions or further action. So I will give a small example, and I'll go back to my blockchain-based example of a letter of credit. Let us assume that there is an exporter in India. He wants to export some goods to, let's say, an importer in Singapore. Let's say there is an Indian community in Singapore that they want to import some, let's say, some food item. They want to import, let us assume, Alfonso mangoes from Ratnagiri, because they are a group of Maharashtrians who like that flavor of the appus. So they have placed an order. So there is a letter of credit which has come from the foreign importing bank to, let us assume, this cooperative bank, which is in a remote village in Ratnagiri, says that XYZ company, here is a letter of credit asking you or authorizing you to export, let's say, 100 crates of Apus mangoes in the month of January. Now, what does ML do? ML now knows it has got the data. Based on the data, the program comes over and says, okay, in the last 3 years, this particular company has been banking with this bank. In the last 3 years, they have been exporting 100 crates every year. In the last 3 years, after the 100 crates have been exported, they have used the air route for exporting through the Mumbai airport. Every time the airway bill has been added on, it has been sent as an electronic document through the EDI interface to the customs systems at the Singapore airport. And the moment the Air India flight lands down, because it's a perishable commodity, it's given free access to priority clearance of the customs, goes over to a chain of shop, let's say Walmart or something in Singapore. The shop takes over the crate of mangoes and delivers it to the person who is wanting to do there. That is from a marketing or the business side. But what is more important for the machine language, it works for this, sees that as soon as the crate has landed at the shop in Singapore, let's say the Walmart, immediately a message goes to, let's say, DBS Bank, a bank which is in the news of late, sends a message across saying that this letter of credit needs to be honored. Based on that, a remittance instruction goes over from DBS Bank, comes over, let us assume it has come over to Lakshmi Vilas Bank here, or that cooperative bank in Ratnagiri. Money gets credited to the exporter's account immediately. The whole thing happens through a blockchain, but what is at the silent background is machine learning. So the machine has now, through a series of code, series of instructions, watched all the transactions or the operands or the iterations or the instructions which have been executed, develop its own set of language and says, okay, this is how I'm going to do the coding. So this time when the crate of mangoes is being brought by this exporter to the bank, or the airway bill is being given electronically to the bank then knows how to discount the bill, how to send it across to the foreign counterpart bank, how that bank will take it over and then send it back, so that the money realization happens almost in real-time basis as soon as the mangoes are actually taken delivery of by the importer in Singapore. Again, the advantage here is that one need not have a specific software program code written by an IT company, tested, what we call as beta testing, do a user acceptance test, implement it in a bank, test it out and do it. No, there is a framework which is available, which is part of the machine language. The machine language makes the language useful for that particular operand, does the transaction. The next LC, which is perhaps from an automobile company to another manufacturer there, may follow a different machine language pattern. But what is common at the bank end is that this knows how funds transfers take place, this knows how documents have to be negotiated, and therefore this knows how digital transactions have to be taken care of. And to do all this, you need artificial intelligence. If artificial intelligence days the funds movement had to take place, you need machine language to give the inputs. And that's why I said there needs to be a healthy marriage between these two. Again, I have tried to oversimplify and give this as an example just for understanding. In the real world of the actual fintech, it's much more complicated and complex, but suffice to understand for the audience that it will all be done in a transparent manner without we understanding. Very similar to an automatic transmission car. Nobody knows how the gears work. Nobody knows that what is the replacement for the clutch which was there in a manual car. But all I know is that if I put it in auto mode, the gears will change depending on the pressure that I give on the accelerator, so that the car will be on gear 1, gear 2, gear 3, depending on the speed that is required. Or if Tesla were to have its move and you're going to have driverless cars work in the future, these driverless cars are going to use ML to a very large extent and AI to decide how the car has to go. A similar thing is going to happen in the finance world and in the digital payment space.
Right, sir. So, thank you very much. So, yeah, what is the level of adoption of AI and ML, and currently in banks and maybe other financial institutes? And do you foresee AI ML technologies will kind of dramatically change the way we do payments?
Okay. Well, the answer to this, you must have seen that up till now I've been very optimistic. Now I will be cautiously pessimistic and then move over to be optimistic once again. KK's point is really one which is hitting the right chord. The adoption of AI and ML, especially in the banks, and it's across the world, it's not only India, is not to that extent that whatever I said till now is going to happen tomorrow. We have actually only started taking baby steps towards AI and ML. In fact, many of the banks, these have been implemented without the banks knowing that it is AI. There have been I made a mention about this earlier, customer relationship management or CRM tools that have been built in. There have been tools which have given predicative behavior, meaning certain tools which will tell the banks, look, this is when perhaps your asset may become non-performing. Or this will give an early warning signal to a bank. I moved over from digital to lending only to give the point saying that this is an area where there is huge potential. So some of the banks I know have actually called them as AI tools. Many of the banks have not called them AI tools, but then these are tools which can easily be migrated to function in an AI manner. So the adoption of AI formally is at infancy. One must accept that. So it is going to take some time for the banks to accept, sometimes for the fintech. I'm now saying fintech, I'm not saying IT, because I know that fintech has now matured enough to merge IT and technology and the financial space. So fintech to ultimately fine tune the delivery of the AI systems the way banks would want it, banks to accept them and convert them or integrate them with their core banking system, with their delivery channels, whether it is electronic, digital, mobile, whatever it is, and then give them as delivery offerings to their customer, whether he's got net banking or mobile banking or the new trends in banking. So it is certainly, you're very right, KK. It's going to take some time. But one of the green shoots which I'm right now witnessing in banks, including in banks in India, and in fact, it's a very healthy trend to see some of these happening in the smaller banks, especially in the smaller banks which have niche customers who are moving over to technology or digital usage methods. It's happening in a large way. So although I know it's going to take some time for this to get firmly rooted, I'm optimistic now that once it gets rooted, it's like the bamboo, it will start growing very fast and it will go. And again, my dream, and I hope this becomes true, is that India is going to be the leader here and show the rest of the world, like in the retail payment space, where we are a leader and other countries are trying to follow us. The other countries are also going to follow the AI-based movements that we do. Only one small point I wanted, and then I'll stop with that, is that I'm not too sure whether the growth of AI will be fast only in digital payments or in other spheres of banking as well, because I'm also finding a lot of interest being shown by bankers on using AI for their other core products as well. More on their asset portfolio, which is on lending. So I think it's going to happen in AI, especially the peer-to-peer lending and other type of new lending forms that are coming in the retail space. But if these were to happen without the payment leg happening, it won't happen. So payments are also going to witness a substantial usage of AI. May not be tomorrow, but certainly day after tomorrow. Now, whether the day after tomorrow is going to be 3 months later or 6 months later, but it's going to be a finite time. I'm not hazarding a guess now, but it's going to be in a time frame where we are all going to witness it very soon.
Okay, so we you did talk about AI, ML, in the uh, for payments. Give us some examples. It's outside the payments. You did mention about guests coming in, but is there any other area where you feel it'll have an early adoption?
Yeah, in fact, one of the early adoptions, or I would say two earlier adoptions, and I will talk about both of them. The first one, which is of importance for both the government, the Reserve Bank, every entity in the country, is usage of AI in financial inclusion. In fact, one of the most difficult challenges in the financial sector, especially in the banking sector, is KYC. The less we talk about KYC, the better it will be, because I'm sure everybody has a tale of woe to talk about how difficult he or she felt about KYC, or as a bank, how they had their challenges in KYC. Same happens to mobile. Same happens to everywhere where there is a need to track or trace a person. So that being the case, for financial inclusion, the biggest challenge is to identify a person and get the person in the financial space when he is not there. There's been substantial amount of improvement in financial inclusion in the country, that the amount of financially excluded people is very, very small now. But nevertheless, one needs to have all the people brought under the ambit of FI, and AI is going to play a stellar role there. The good news there is that the government has also embraced AI in a large way. And if one can, we all know about the JAM Trinity, the Jandan, Aadhaar, and the mobile, which has revolutionized the systems. I think there is going to be a new trinity which is going to come, which is going to be similar to JAM. The A for Aadhaar will perhaps be replaced by A for artificial intelligence. And the M will be not for mobile, but for something which is on the move. I'm now not going to say mobile, I'm going to say movement. It will be a movement to bring in people. It will be anybody who's on the move, and it will be something which will keep moving so much, so it will be very dynamic. And that is what is going to be. Let's say, for example, that there is a small farmer in a village who doesn't have access today to any bank account at all, let's say in a tribal part of Odisha, which is not even connected to the rest of the country. If that is the person has to be financially included, the government will have a means to know that here is a person who is not financially included. Let's say he is being given some wages under MNREGS, which is one of those essential means for livelihood for them. So from the system in the bank, it will know that here is a person who's been given salary or wages under the Menrega in cash. The AI system knows that here is a person, a potential person for financial inclusion, goes ahead, goes to either a bank or a post office, or it could be the post office savings bank or the new post office bank IPB. Somewhere a message goes across saying, here is a person, please go there. Now, going there doesn't mean that a bank representative has to go there, because this is a remote part of the country. There are costs involved in it, and the returns the banks may feel from this customer may not be very high. So the going is going to be virtual. And when the going is virtual, there is going to be tracking. AI keeps tracking and says this is indeed a genuine virtual access which has been made to the customer. And based on the customer's either gesture, signs, talking, signature, depending on what it is, it's going to establish that this is a non-reputable indeed customer who he is. So one of the uses, I can go on this, but then my topic will go astray. So one of the uses for AI is going to be on financial inclusion. The second other usage, which I think our financial friends will have a lot of attraction, I made a mention about that, is going to be on credit delivery. The biggest challenge that we have today in the country, which includes the MSMEs as well, and they are crying that they are not getting credit, although the system is flush with liquidity today. The liquidity is not going to sectors where it is required. I think that one of the potential uses of AI is going to be identifying the specific sector. No, not the specific sector, the specific subsector, not even the specific subsector, the specific individual or the company or the entity who actually requires funding. AI will be able to do that, send a message across to the most appropriate credit affording institution within his capability, vicinity, whatever be the easiest access point. And it could be completely digital, something which the P2P, the peer-to-peer lending is trying to do it, and not, don't mistake this with crowdfunding. It is going to happen. And this entity will be able to give the funds to the person when he wants, where he wants, and not to him, but to who he has to transfer the funds to. So there's going to be a huge impact of AI in the credit delivery segment, which means the asset management of banks is going to take a huge advantage from AI. And if the liabilities automatically get matched, then ALM becomes very easy. So asset liability management becomes very easy. And if ALM becomes very easy, and if it is done the right way, then monitoring the asset quality becomes very easy. And if asset quality monitoring becomes very easy, then anti-money laundering and other nefarious things also get relegated to the backboard. And therefore, AML will now in future move over to AIML, which is artificial intelligence machine language. And at the base of all this is going to be funds movement, because without that, that doesn't work. Our other systems won't work. And therefore, AI-based payments also will get a fillip.
True, very true, sir. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think Ganesh sir has explained to us what's AI and what's ML, and he's also given us examples not only in payments but outside the payment area. So, I hope the dialogue and the discussion that I'm having with Ganesh sir is going well with you. So, at this moment of time, I would request you all to put in your questions. I already see one question which is already coming from one of our very frequent member. Please go ahead, put in your questions into the chat box, and I shall get those questions across to Ganesh Kumar to answer those questions. You can even ask an audio question. should you desire to do that, raise your hand and the digital team will prompt me that so-and-so person would like to ask a direct question. So, I already have one chat box question and one audio question. So let me take first the chat box question, which says, because that came first, it says, so each innovation is for betterment of the society. But along with each innovation, some people use it in the wrong direction. Yeah, it's always there, the good and bad. Now, Metro is using driverless train and using it, but again, many accidents have happened. My question is, sir, how can we prevent such incidents happening by the system and by expert cheaters, particularly when more than 70% population are in the rural area and there is less education? So what are your expert views on the issue, on the negative side, sir? He's asking.
Okay. Good. It's a good question, and I think one needs to look at all this. In fact, I remember a decade ago when AI was at its infancy, there used to be this debate saying that will computers take over and rule the world? Thankfully for us, I know there have been at least half a dozen movies made around it. We can have a separate session talking about those movies. But the point is, today I think it's fairly well established that the computers are not going to rule us. Because ultimately the AI is an outcome of a set of operands, a set of instructions which have been given by us. So what might perhaps happen is that there is a rude operator, a person who is actually a thief, a person with a malified intent who writes a piece of code which does what it is not intended to do. Very well possible, can be easily done. So one of the challenges that is there, and this is not only for artificial intelligence, but it is there for any system. It was there in the manual systems, it was there in the digital systems, it is going to be there tomorrow in any future systems, because ultimately people want money, people have the attraction or lure for easy money. And easy money is just by making a small set of instructions and getting the whole thing, rather than trying to actually counterfeit a note or trying to do something which is much more difficult. So one of the things that is going to happen in the AI space is that it is also going to spin off a whole new knot of software programs, which, like it has happened, antivirus programs and safety security programs in the computer world, it's going to actually spin off a whole lot of AI-based tools, which are ultimately programs, which will be able to decipher and find out whether this particular, I will, for want of a better word, use transaction, is actually done with a genuine motive, genuine intention, or a malified motive or a bad intention. It will take some time to perfect and hone these tools, but it's going to happen. So that is how we address it. But the bigger challenge is, what do we use AI for? And I think the question has a real point of concern, which is actually ensconced in it. Just like the social network or the social media, when it came, everyone went gaga over it and said, this is going to change the world. People later on realized that this can be misused. The potential of social media for misuse and creating a whole lot of negative impact is much higher than the positive impact that it does. AI is also no exception. It will do the same. So what do we need to do? I think 2 points need to be taken care of whenever anybody implements an AI-based system. The first and the foremost important thing is to ensure that the AI-based system does only what it is intended to do and does nothing more than what it intends to do. Easy statement, very difficult to implement. Why it is very difficult to implement? If I say in a digital payment system, I will say that the AI-based system is only supposed to debit the person who has authorized the transaction, his account, and credit it to the beneficiary's account. Very easily said. But how do you ensure that, for example, an authorization to debit Ganesh Kumar's account is a genuine authorization given by Ganesh Kumar and not by anybody else? If the system says that it's going to be taken, like I mentioned in the beginning, that my eyeball closure and opening, if it is taken to be as an authorization, somebody can just record. I'm now talking. I'm sure all of you have access to devices which can record. And when I'm actually opening and closing my eye, somebody can record it. That can be taken by a system, and it will match with Ganesh Kumar's iris and say this is indeed Ganesh Kumar's iris. And when that open closure is replayed, it can treat that it is as if it is the authorization given by Ganesh Kumar. That should not happen. So we need to build in systems which will ensure that it has happened at the right time, at the right place, with non-repudiation, with ensuring that tomorrow Ganesh Kumar cannot come back to the bank and say, I never authorized this transaction, whatever be the medium it does. This is easy to do. Although I said it is difficult, but it is relatively easy of the 2 points that I said. The second point, which is really going to be a challenge, it's going to be a dragon, it's going to be the biggest challenge that we are going to face, is that the outcome of AI can be misused. I'm not saying that AI is going to be done the wrong way. Here, the AI is used the right way. But the outcome of the AI, which is a lot of data, which is a lot of signals, which is a lot of information, can be misused. These can be misused again by rogue players in the system. Could be some bankers who are actually not having the right ethics, or it could be by people who have got access to the data who are not intended to have access, similar to hackers and others who are getting the data. So one of the things I now come back to is we need to possibly ensure that the outcome of AI is used for the transaction and not available later on, which means it is something going to be volatile. And I will give a small example. You go to an ATM, you do a transaction. Today, most of us, when it asks for a PIN, we give a PIN which is permanent. I call it permanent because we keep it permanently because we don't want to change the PIN. Even if the system forces us to change the PIN every 30 days or 90 days, we do, because it says 3 tries, 4 pins cannot be reused. We do 4, 5 times the key in and come back to the same old PIN. So we try to fool the system that way. But we need to have something which is volatile, meaning that if a PIN is used in an ATM transaction that time, afterwards, as soon as the transaction is over and it is over, there is a means of authentication to the system later on for the banker to know that it was done based on a PIN, but the PIN evaporates. After that, the next transaction requires a new PIN. How do we do it? My fintech people will have to come out with a new solution. I've got some solutions. We'll talk in an IT session later on about how it can be done. So one of the things that we need to perhaps take care in AI is that the outcome of AI is not available for people to misuse. So if you can make it volatile, if you can vaporize it quickly so that it is not available for misuse, but at the same time, it is available as a log for future reference, that I think will take care of the second and the most important challenge that we have. So like any new technology which brings in new challenges, AI is also going to bring in new challenges. For my IT friends and the security, cyber security and other security related people in the industry, here's a huge potential, a huge opening which is going to come. And because of the high level of intelligence, now I'm not talking about artificial intelligence, the human brain intelligence which is there in India, I'm sure there's going to be a huge potential there as well. But anyway, coming back to the point that KK asked, one needs to be very guarded against this. So when AI takes over and digital payments are going to be actually replacing some of the functions which our current humans are doing either at the bank or at the customer, how do we redeploy these human resources? They are redeployed to see that the tools that they use, whether it is an AI, AIML, or any other tool that comes later on, is being used for the right purpose that it is there. So the other thing which is going to happen is that while banks will still continue to do banking, they will be heavily dependent on the latest technologies. Right now, I'm calling it AI and ML. It could be something else later on. So you need people who have the aptitude to manage the technologies also. They need not be hardcore programmers. They need not be people who understand all this, but they need to be people who have the aptitude to actually see that they can exploit the benefits of these technologies. Huge challenge indeed, but I'm sure we can overcome these.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Khandelwal, for that question. I think every new technology does bring its challenges. So will AI and ML will bring its challenges, and I think we are good enough to kind of overcome those challenges. In the days to come, we'll see that. So now let's take another question, sir. This question is coming from media. Mr. Krishna Tripathi, who is another regular to our show, would like to ask you a question. Mr. Tripathi, can you please unmute yourself and ask the question?
Sir, I have a question. How AI and machine learning can be used, or it is being used by the government sector in improving the financial inclusion? When I say financial inclusion, we have Jan accounts and basic banking services account, but now the next stage, how to lend money to them, how to offer insurance products to them, whether it is already used at that level by public sector banks, What is your experience? And if it is not, then how it can be used? Because these people don't have any credit history. They are not part of formal financial system. They don't have any CIBIL score. So how AI and machine learning can be used there? And I also have a follow-up question.
Okay, right, Mr. Tripathi. Good point again. In fact, the answer to your question, I don't know whether you will be liking it or not. The answer to the overall question is that no, the banks are not ready right now to give directed lending based on AI right now, because as I said sometime earlier, AI is right now in its infancy. It's going to take some time before it actually establishes itself. And I'm sure, although I said that AI has a huge potential in credit delivery, that may not be the first application which banks will use, because that's a risky application and that has a huge negative impact which will be on the financial sector. So I in fact think that use of AI for digital payments will be much more acceptable in the initial stages, but it will certainly be used once it gains the popularity. To answer your specific point about whether the government has anything, I am not too sure as to whether they are ready to roll out anything, but a lot of experiments are going on. I can try to give a hypothetical example, and I'm not relating this to, I'm giving some names, but this is not with reference to anything which is happening today. Now, all of us know that in GST, which is a hot topic, a lot of information is actually available with the government. Now, using that information, the government can know who is, let's say, a small scale or a medium MSME manufacturer, how much is the money that he has actually got as loan, because they can find out from the invoices that come from this particular MSME. They can know how much of receivables are there. They can use it on what the Reserve Bank has given as a TREDS platform to even give credit. This doesn't require AI at all. It can be done today with the existing systems that is there. Now, if one were to expand that, I gave that just as an example. If one were to expand that, and I gave this as an example to a village case earlier when KK made the point, one of the things that can be done is that, yes, the JAM accounts have, the Jandan account is already opened with this customer. The system, the bank system, or the BC who is there, the business correspondent who is there, knows that there are only financial transactions which are taking place. There are no credit or no loans which have taken place. So the bank system can give a list. I'm giving it at a very high level now, can give a list of people who have got basic savings accounts but do not have credit facilities, do not have loans at all. Once that is made available, this can be merged, and I'm just giving loud thinking now. The real nitty-gritties will have to be worked out later on. What I'm saying now is not the only approach or the model that has to be done. This can be mapped, let's say, with the Aadhaar, and once it is mapped with the Aadhaar, it can be actually traced, and he can find out how many credits came, what were the usage of this money that has come in. And I'll give an example. Let's say from the government, he got a DPT of 2,000 rupees, 2,500. 2,500, he spent 500 rupees for seeds, 1,000 rupees for fertilizers, let's say 100 rupees for drinking. All this can be found out. Once that is found out, and if it is found out that he is using the money properly and that the government is refurbishing it as per the norm, then here is a customer, here is a farmer who's possibly, at this point of time, I'm saying possibly, he's a good person in terms of credit worthiness. So this can trigger off, and based on AI, the bank which is nearby can get a message saying that here is, let's say, Ramdiani, who is a person who is generally under, let's say, category A. So a loan of 1,000 rupees can be given to him. So a loan of 1,000 rupees is given to him with an obligation saying that if he doesn't repay from the next DBT, the 1,000 rupees can be offset. I'm just again giving a hypothetical example. The real life will not work this way. So once that happens, and the loan is given by that bank, which is, as I said earlier, easily accessible and meeting his requirements and the bank's profile match. If the loan is repaid as per the terms which it was envisaged to be, then here is a loan customer. The customer who was a financially included customer who was only having bank basic savings account has now become a customer for credit delivery. Once he becomes a messenger, he spreads it to other farmers in the village, and the process goes on replicating. On the other hand, if he doesn't repay, the government gets back the money. He doesn't get the 1,000 rupees out of the second next reimbursement of DBT, which his wife goes and complains and says, "Tumne kya kiya? Why did you not get the money?" And therefore, hopefully, through social pressure and other things, he becomes a better person so that he becomes eligible for the loan. There can be fallouts. There can be cases where the money may not come out also, but that is like 360-degree view. Everything has positive and negative sides. We'll have to fine tune all this, but it can happen. So I don't know whether I've given a full confidence-based reply for you, but I envisage that this can happen. there's a lot of coordination which has to happen between banks, between governments, between people, between various agencies, amongst various agencies. One has to see how it works, but it's not impossible.
Okay.
Sir, I have a second question.
Yeah.
If you can permit it.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to ask, what is the part of IT expenditure of a typical banking company or fintech company of its turnover? It is 1%, 2%. What is the industry average? And if they were to implement machine learning and AI, then by what extent it will go up?
Tripati, again, it's not a one size fits all. The new banks which have started after liberalization have a substantially technology-based platform.
Yes.
So for them, it will be incremental expenditure. For a bank which is a legacy bank, been in existence for more than 100 years, the expenditure will be higher. So one cannot say that it is 1%, 2%. Percentages really don't make much sense here. I would rather look at it from outcome. So if there is a bank which is at this level, let's say level A, on fintech, level A on delivery using fintech, if that can move from level A 10% upward, and the 10% upward is actually achieved, let's say, by X amount of expenditure, then the board of the bank, the management of the bank have to actually work towards from level A plus 10%, they should go to level A plus 20%. And to level A plus 20%, it should not be X percentage, or it should not be 2X. It should be less than 2X, because the expenditure is now going to be actually telescopic. So what happens is every incremental benefit is not going to have the same type of incremental expenditure. It's going to be much less than the incremental expenditure. So to sum up, my guesstimate is that the benefits are going to be far more than the expenditure. And the second point which will give you comfort is that today, most of the boards of most of the banks don't have any hesitation in actually authorizing expenditure in fintech, provided they see returns. And returns is not in terms of a percentage of IRR, ARR, or anything, or a profit. It is returns in terms of transaction volumes or turnovers increasing. This is happening, and therefore the new, I think, as media, you perhaps it will be a good idea if you could also monitor growth rather than mere expenditure. That will perhaps be a better yardstick measurement option.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I think more the percentages are more for the perhaps the legacy banks, where they have both old operations as well as the new things. But the newer banks that are coming in, it's like almost everything is digitized out there. So that kind of percentage perhaps will not fit the bill for every bank, as we talk about. Sir, Amit Thakur asked a very interesting question. He asked the question, can AIML be effective in credit risk evaluation over and above what bank is already doing for retail and corporate customers?
Okay. Right. Again, I'll give one example at a very, very low level. It can certainly function. But one thing is, it is not going to be, I'll put it the other way, I'll put it positively. It's going to be complementary rather than disruptive, meaning that whatever the bank does in its own current methodologies are going to be there. AI-based evaluation is going to be better. And I'll give you a small example since you mentioned about retail. Let us assume that here is a person who wants to go, the summer is, it's now winter, the winter is going to go over and summer is coming. His wife is pressing him to buy an air conditioner. So he is in the city of Mumbai. So he says, let me go to Vijay Sales to buy an air conditioner. So he goes to Vijay Sales. And I don't know how many of you know, in Vijay Sales, they have got a tie-up with Bajaj Finserv, so that when this man goes to buy an air conditioner, based on his credit rating, he need not go to a bank, but Bajaj Finserv may give him a loan, which he can actually use for buying the air conditioner and then pay it off in EMIs.
Yes.
Now, one of the things that I dream of is Bajaj Finserv is possibly going to go use a rudimentary AI and then find out this man is working in this company, this is his take-home salary, this is the amount of loans that he already has, this is the size of his family, this is the electricity consumption he has got, and therefore the AC that he buys will be something that he will be able to pay. I hope they will do a customer due diligence and decide that he is worthy of giving the 20,000 rupees as a loan for procuring the AC. That's over. Where is it that the bank's role comes? I'm assuming now that the bank is the one which is going to give the money and not Bajaj Finserv. what does he do? Now, based on AI, again, the AI will now come and say that Ganesh Kumar is going to go and buy the AC for 20,000 rupees. His house is, let's say, in, just for argument's sake, I'm saying it is in a small lane in the Girgaon area where the AC unit cannot even be fitted properly because each house common walls are there and all. So he says that he wants to buy a window air conditioner. So the AI will send a message across to the bank saying that if you were to give a loan to this, nothing wrong about the man buying the air conditioner, but it's quite difficult to install a window AC because the wall that he has got is shared with somebody else. They may not get a permission to install the AC. So whether this AC is going to do what it is expected is not sure. Therefore, his capability to pay back the EMIs. I gave a retail case. It could, the same thing can be used for a priority sector lending, or it could be for a corporate lending as well. So the AI can be used to predict behavior of return of the capital, meaning whether the loan will be serviced properly or not. But as I said, it won't be supplanting the bank system. The bank system will be there. You will complement this, and together you will be able to assess creditworthiness much better than what you're doing today. So certainly the answer is yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Amit, for a good question, and I hope you got the answers correct. So, while these new technologies look promising for both customers, payment providers, payment service providers, how safe and secure the data would be? And let's look at the safety point of view, because that is perhaps uppermost in every customer's mind whenever they do a digital transaction.
Correct. I made a little bit of a mention of this earlier. There is this old famous saying in the IT system which says, in the communication system, which says, the safety of a communication or the security of a communication system is as safe as the weakest link in the chain.
Yeah.
So, and most often than not, it's the customer's device which is the weakest link, because that is a device over which the bank doesn't have full control. And that's a device which the customer wants to do everything. He would like to see every video that comes without realizing that videos can also embed software which can clandestinely go and settle in the mobile. And every time I do a financial transaction, it can capture some data, including my password if I'm giving it separately. So there are risks. So you're right. Safety is only as good as we perceive it. So this is where, as I said earlier, as bankers or as financial intermediaries, including in the fintech world, we need to actually have more aptitude, more empathy towards the users of the system. The user of the system can be the bank. User of the system can be a telco who is communicating or taking their telecommunication packets. It can be a customer. It can be a regulator. It can be the government. It can be anybody. All of them will have to possibly come together. They'll have to sit across and say, look, this is what I mean by safety. And the meaning of safety by a regulator will be different from meaning of safety by an end user or customer. It'll be different from what a bank wants, and it'll be different from the IT company. It may be different from the service provider. All of them have to sit across, and this is where thankfully we have got standards. There are standards for safety. There are standards for data. Now, if these standards are made interoperable, meaning they are common standards across all the service providers, then I think we get a lot of confidence, because everybody follows the same standard. Something similar to the PCI DSS, which is used in digital payment systems, which gives people confidence that if people are following PCI DSS, that means they are at that level of safety and security. Some certification will have to be done. We'll have to do that. And the last point I wanted to say, which I mentioned earlier, data should be volatile, meaning that it should not be, as far as possible, stored for future access.
Yes.
If that is taken care of, one big disadvantage is actually addressed.
Yes. So with this, we have passed the 5 o'clock. If you don't mind, I'll just take one more question. We started a little bit late. So we've talked about these AI, MI, ML, new technologies, and can be adopted easily by the public sector banks and maybe some of the private banks, etc. Let's look at the small banks, or the smaller cooperative banks, not the bigger ones, but the smaller cooperative banks. How is it that these technologies can help them?
Yeah, the name, the answer is there in the name that you said. They are cooperative banks, and therefore cooperation is what has to be the most important thing. And that has already been proven. There are many cooperative banks who are sharing common technology platforms so that the costs come down, and that whatever gaps they have in knowledge or in expertise is taken care of by others. I can give you two examples. I'm not trying to market or support anybody. The Reserve Bank had actually recognized this 2.5 years ago, and they said that for cooperative banks, you can go for shared cloud-based service facilities. And the Reserve Bank's own subsidiary called IFTAS is providing cloud-based security and safety and even core banking systems available to these cooperative banks. So my message to the cooperative banks is, those who can afford and those who have the expertise, go ahead alone. But the others, cooperate. You compete for business, but cooperate for common systems. Systems are already in place. There are institutions which are doing it. Take their support, and then it'll be easy to go ahead.
Yes, sir. That's good. So yeah, so cooperatives should cooperate. Okay, so I think we will let me take one question if you don't mind, sir.
Sure.
It's pretty relevant. So the question has come from anonymous. It says China is slated to be the superpower in AI. Given that situation, can AI be dangerous too with so much of data inside?
Okay. I generally don't do this, but I will ask a counter question and then give the answer.
Okay.
Does this person, whoever anonymous he is, also say that the China is the world leader in retail digital payments, or India?
True. Yeah.
Okay. Now, if one were to go by data, and I don't know how accurate these data are,
right.
I am somehow, and not because I'm and it is because I'm an Indian, I am tempted to believe that India is far more ahead in terms of retail payment transaction flows through digital modes in a more safe and secure manner in India compared to China. Okay, now let me give the answer. I guess he must have got an idea as to where I'm moving towards. China is certainly the world's undisputed leader in using AI. I don't know whether the Chinese people are also listening to this. I'm sure they have access to that. In trying to even monitor individual citizens of the country. I know all of you know how individual citizens Chinese are monitored. And AI-based systems are used. There are cameras which, and the Chinese have accepted it as a way of life. Thankfully for us in India, citizens' privacy is still prime. And I'm sure that that will also be reflected in the data privacy bill, which becomes an act or whatever it is, much more about that later on. But for the time being, this thing is, maybe China is a leader in AI. In fact, I would actually be very happy in new technologies. We should be -1 generation, meaning that we should not be the first generation to embrace a technology, because the first generation is the generation where there are huge amount of loopholes, bugs, and all that. The -1 generation is a more stable generation. And those of you who have used IT systems will know that Windows -1, if today Windows 11 is the latest generation, Windows 10 is a better stable system than Windows 11. Windows 11 may have the latest gizmos, but Windows 10 is more safe to use. So the same way, if they are one, then I would actually exhort my AI developers, fintech people to actually study their systems, learn their weaknesses, and bridge them, provide for them in our systems. That is for the fintech. For my bankers and others who are going to be users of AI, and AI is going to be not only in banks, it's going to be cutting across all systems. An auto rickshaw driver is also going to use AI tomorrow to find out who's going to be his customer, who will pay, who's going to be his customer, who will be a good customer taking a long ride, things of that kind. So users of AI should also try to actually learn from whatever China, if China is a leader, learn from them. So try to get information from China about what their problems are, learn from them, and then try to improve them. We have tried to do that in the defense, and we have, I don't know whether it's nice to say the statement, but I think we have given them back better than what they would have expected. Better in the sense that they got hit more than what they expected. On a similar vein, I think in the financial world as well, I'm not sure whether they are the leaders in the financial year. They may be leaders in other surveillance areas where AI is used. But if they are, then I think we should learn and become #1 there. It's an advice. No, it's not an advice. It's a request. No, it's not even a request. It is something that all of us should have as a mantra. And if we have
Okay.
that as a mantra, I'm sure we can grow very well.
Okay, thank you, sir. So we have to come to an end of the session because we are 12 minutes, 15 minutes almost past the
Sure.
hour, well beyond our time. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this discussion that I had with Ganesh, Mr. Ganesh Kumar. As usual, whenever Mr. Ganesh Kumar comes, the time is always having extra large wings. So he just flies away. Yeah, the 1 hour is just vanishes in no time. Like he says, the pin code should evaporate. Time evaporates whenever he's around, and but I think that calls for that we have him again for the other questions that I really wanted to ask. I'm sure you all also wanted to have a couple of more questions have come in, but I'm unable to take it. With these words, like he was saying, artificial intelligence, AI, machine learning, ML, cryptocurrency, and blockchain, 4 absolutely fantastic technologies, all in its infancy. Okay, but these are the combination of of any of these 4 is going to revolutionize the way we look at doing digital transaction. Forget not only payments but everything else. And
Correct.
those are, like I always feel, in the digital world, there's a lot of exciting things going to happen in the days to come, and we shall watch that, we shall use that, and of course we will invite once again Mr. Ganesh Kumar to give us some more insight into the new technologies. With these, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Mr. Ganesh Kumar for coming over and spending time with us. Mr. Ganesh Kumar, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure, and I hope I could add some value. Thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely, sir. So before audience, ladies and gentlemen, before you leave, just note down the new timing. It is 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. is a new time that we are now starting from today. And in the weeks to come, we have a line of good speakers along with Mr. R. Gandhi. We have, who was a former Deputy Governor of RBI. We have Mr. M. Balakrishnan, former World Bank advisor and ex-COO of NPCI. We have banking stalwarts like Mr. Mohan Tansale, Mr. Kamath, and many others who will, I'm sure, you have seen earlier, and taken a lot of intelligent talk from them. We hope to see you again. We hope this time 4 to 5 p.m. is convenient to most of you now. Do give us a feedback like you always do, so that we can improve upon our quality of this discussion that we have. Thank you so much and have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.